Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about Black Clover chapter 274, the manga chapter review. Welcome back to the Manga Man. If you haven't seen my World Trigger video, I did mention that I have been away for the last 2 weeks or so due to illness. I basically had a week of cold and flu. And I made a video on One Piece. I believe it was a Thursday or a Friday, and then literally the next day I was bad for a good 5 or 6 days. And then I spent more or less another week recovering. My first video back was my World Trigger video. So I do have catch up to do. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to spend a portion of this video, which I'll timestamp for those who are interested or not interested, for chapters 272 and 273, and I'll timestamp exactly when 274 starts. So without further ado, let's get into this review. So, chapter 272. I do want to keep this section short, so this will be brief, but I want to just touch on a few points and kind of get them out there. So the first thing is, training on his own. It's probably a really good idea, because as of late, since he got Bell, he has been focusing on how to make the most of that ability working together in. And then he had his elf upgrade as well, which probably improved his mana control, mana and all mana related things. But sometimes it's good to go back to bases, and him training on his own is a good thing, because essentially his base level will improve, which means when he then starts using more powerful abilities, they will exponentially improve as well. Because I assume the use of the Sylph's bells, mana and abilities are kind of like a multiplier. So the stronger his base level is, I'd imagine the stronger those abilities will be, or the more he can make the most out of them. He's then kind of interrupted by Langris, and I like the fact that they don't gloss over kind of his activities, and there is a reluctance there, and the fact that he's not willing just to be all pally with him. And it's both sided, so we still see some of that nastiness from Langris, and we see that doesn't really gel well with Langris anyway, probably because of a difference of opinion and a difference of just generally being. And being that Langris is a spatial user of magic, it does make sense for them to train together, and it's mentioned that Langris has also gotten stronger. We don't know how he's gotten stronger, but it makes sense when you think about it. He was infected by elf mana. If he's going to use those algorithms or those wavelengths of magic and heal, how that similar kind of boost that the rest of the people infected were. The fact that says former vice captain was funny, because he was the former vice captain, but it stings to hear it from the current vice captain. But realistically, being that the captain, the vice captain, the former vice captain all had their asses kicked before, it doesn't really mean much. It's kind of glossed over a little bit that they're going to work together, and they kind of use it's a Golden Dawn problem, so we'll deal with it. So I don't really like you, but I'll accept you for now because it's a Golden Dawn problem. So that's one bit of it. The next thing I want to touch on for 272 is the fact that we get a mention or re-mention of the resistance in the Spade Kingdom. So you get an inkling of that anyway, depending on translation and if it's actually noticed, with that member of the Royal Guard or so coming to see so many chapters ago. So you do see that. But now it's specifically mentioned on how they made these magic cookies that help your strength. So the fact that it's reinforced means that obviously it's going to be a thing. And from the roars for this week's chapter, you get to see that a little bit. So we'll see more of that hopefully leading down the line. We see there's a lot of funny bits in it for me, so I'm going to go through the funny bits that I thought were interesting. Number one, we get the 1090, where essentially Leiba says that Asta is a genius 10% of the time and a complete idiot 90% of the time. And basically, this time when they do this kind of a Power Rangers Megazord transformation, it's an idiotic kind of member of the moment in time. We get told that the two days time has basically gone. So 2 days have kind of gone very quickly, and essentially this uniting isn't successful. And before he leaves, he has one last kind of fight, and basically sets up a dark mana zone And then we essentially see what it takes for them to unite at the end of 272. And a lot of it is literally these like-minded goals. So you see revenge for Lichita, rescuing Yami on either side, but the one common goal that unites them essentially is they're going to have to protect each other, so they have to work together, and that's what sets off the end of the chapter, which means the uniting, and that basically is chapter 272. So let's move on to 273 now. So, chapter 273. Chapter 273 essentially focus initially on the Spade Kingdom. We see that Zenon's essentially checking in on Dante, and we see a scientist there. This scientist turns out to be Morris, the person who kind of used to run the Diamond Kingdom from the shadows and did all those weird experiments. So you know the things he did with Fana and the death matches and how all the Shining Generals were created and that sort of thing. So we see that Lotus is with him as well. That's interesting. I'll get to that. But the fact that Morris says that he essentially got overthrown and he's out of the Diamond Kingdom means that hopefully the Diamond Kingdom will prosper a little bit and be better as promised by a former friend of Asta. But the fact that they got their asses whooped by Zenon last time wasn't really a good showing. So does that mean we're going to see more of them coming up? I don't know. We'll see. Now the Lotus thing is interesting because he's always been this wildly cheap character that is very clever, is a veteran of battle, and knows when he's outmatched. I mean, we saw him when he was fighting Locke. We saw the whole thing when they invaded the Clover Kingdom. So it's interesting to see him again. I'm really looking forward to seeing if Locke can have him a rematch and show just how much he's improved. And maybe we'll see more of what Lotus can really do, because he seemed to be holding back in some ways. So that's interesting. Anyway, so we find out that Dante is alive and well, and he's actually stronger, and Dante has this weird look on his face that he's looking forward to that rematch with Yami's little boy, Asta. What I also found interesting is being Morris is a scientist. We don't know how long he's been involved with the Spade Kingdom, and if he's has anything to do with them, the Dark Triad having double abilities, but because of timing, it's kind of strange because he couldn't have, because it's one of those things. He's either basically been involved with them for a very long time since they've overthrown the kingdom, which would have happened around 15-16 years ago, or it's a recent thing. If it's a recent thing, then unless we get told specifically how they've got their double abilities, we have to assume that they've always had them. So it'll be interesting. It's just a question mark there that I wanted to mention just in case. So then we see some of the other experiments. We get this big demon, we see the dark tree, and we see essentially what looks like two coffins, and I'm assuming that's Yami and Vengeance, William. So then that happens, and then we kind of essentially go back to where Asta's training. And then we see more of an aftermath. And there's two things to take from this. We're not being shown what this uniting looks like. This is probably to build up hype, and we're probably going to see that when it's essentially a lot more substantial, a lot more mastered, because it is mentioned that it was basically an instant. It literally didn't last that long, but it was effective because where it did touch, even though Asta and Leiba didn't want to directly hit Nacht, it did undo the uniting that he had, even though it didn't have any form, so there was no something to trace, and it undid his mana zone. So the fact that he's able to do that essentially means that he wasn't wrong with thinking how effective this uniting is going to be, and essentially says to him that, look, just stay here, master it, and then come. And he leaves Grimaldello or Grimaldo. I can never remember the actual translation, so I'll have to go back and check. But anyway, he leaves him to train with them, and you can just see him sweating, and they're like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna die!" And then other shadows like, oh, "He's such an ogre." And then we see essentially the special forces, and it's the people we're expecting. Majority of them are captains. We see the vice captain. with Yuno. We see Langris is there, which makes sense. And then the best part of that is basically Sekke Bronzer. I don't know how he's managed it. From the Raws that I saw for the current chapter, it's mentioned, but it's just funny him being there. He's completely useless. So it's going to be funny. I think he's going to be relief. That being said, chapter 273, let's get on to it. This week's chapter, chapter 274. The ending of this chapter brings a smile to my face every time I see her fight. Anyway, let's get to this, because so far with the summaries of the previous chapters, this video is pretty long as it is, so it does mean I've got to concentrate. So bear with me. Chapter 274. Last chapter we see the ending where Nacht basically meets up with the special forces, you could say, for this army. First thing first is Fuego asks about Asta. Being the great leader that Fuego is, he's obviously concerned, and Nacht basically tells him that look, he's gonna be a while. He's coming along, but it'll be a bit longer. Jack is still a troll. As much as I like his demeanour, sometimes it gets a bit grating, but Jack is Jack. He's just trolling. Like, yeah, I knew he wasn't going to be ready. And then we see Sally, and Sally's talking about testing out her new magical tools, and Makusa gets involved. And to be honest with you, when I saw his face, I was like, in the Raws, I was like, who's that again? And I had to go back and read, and he's essentially the magic research tool science person. Essentially, he says, we've created these anti-mana cloaks, and they work really well, and they're going to be using them. And then we get to the best part. We see Fanzel, we see Kruger being there, so that part was cool. And then we get to the best bit. The best bit is Sekke Bronzer. I knew I saw him in the Raws, and I saw him at the end of last chapter, and I knew it was going to be something stupid, because as far as I've seen, he hasn't done anything in the whole series. And it's like, basically Sekke Bronzer was having this cushy life being an escort for the king. He got told specifically by the king, go show us all your power. Because it's kind of like the king is inserting his dominance into the politics, because he's the king and he has to have a say in everything. So he's basically thrown Sekke in there because he wants to have his own influence on the situation. Not realizing Sekke is bloody useless. And he's there seen chilling and, partying up with the girls, and then you see bloody Jack the Dipper's annoyed face, saying, I don't know what you're going to do, but come with us. And then the best part of that whole interaction, those few panels, is Nat whispering in Sekke's ears, and he's like, look, I know you haven't got no extraordinary abilities, I know you're completely useless in this situation, but you be a good boy and just be a good sacrifice. And that scene and his face and that reaction, honestly, when this becomes an episode and it's getting animated, I'm really looking forward to these scenes, because these scenes are going to be hilarious. Then we get Silver basically confirming about Asta, to which point, being oh, we don't need to worry about Asta. By the time Asta comes, I'll take care of it. And then Jack, being the troll, cuts him off, stops him and says, no, you're not going to do anything, it's going to be me. And then Silver cuts him off, it's not going to be you, it's going to be us. And I really like that, because that ultimately shows a difference in approach by Silver, because typically in that scenario you would expect him to say, nah, you lot are nothing, I'm royalty, I'll take care of it. And the fact that it says us means he truly believes in this squad, maybe not Sekke Bronzer, but he truly believes in these people, and I like that, because ultimately what that shows us is his development, his arc of growth from the beginning of the series to now. That being said, we then see them transport or use Nakt's ability, and then we get a panel with the resistance. It was mentioned last week, we see more of them today. They're from the Spade Kingdom. I really like that. I like the fact that they are doing something for their own country, and not just saying, oh yeah, outsiders come sort of problems are. They need to do something. They don't need to be the most influential, they don't need to be the most effective. They do the right thing here by essentially being dummies or someone to distract the enemy, and they call out the Dark Triad. They talk about the fact that we're going to go down swing, and I like all of that. That for me is fine. They don't need to do much, but what they're doing is fine, because ultimately you need to have a hand, even if it's a small hand or effect in saving your own country. That's I believe in that. I've seen too many of these stories where, somebody has come out and, you saved my country, well, thank you. But they don't do anything themselves. And it's like, what's going to happen when the hero leaves? Anyway, that's enough me rambling. So the fact that the resistance are now kind of out in the open, this gives the opportunity for the elite forces to infiltrate the castle, in the kingdom, the area. But it seems like they've been detected, and on a later panel it says it looks like a rat's in the castle. Now I don't know if this has got something to do with the fact that Nacht is using his ability to get him there. But the fact that the rat could mean one of two things. One, everyone could be detected and, the mana cloaks haven't done anything. Or two, just Nacht has been detected because he's used his ability to get into the castle. We'll find out. Essentially then what happens is that big demon that they were working on that we saw last chapter reveals himself. And they're like, oh my god, it's Majin Buu. Well, or Majin, the ancient demon that they've heard of from past times. And he starts, rampaging, or seems to start rampaging, and then you get the Elite Force asking the question. And I like this. Again, this is going to be another section that I'm really going to look forward to for it to be animated. There's these trembles, there's some, mana fluctuations, and like it says, someone says, will they be okay? And then we see Nacht's face big and smiling. He's like, they'll be fine. And who do we see? Best woman, best girl, Mereoleona steps in and he goes, good job guys, thank you for your raw, and she's ready to fight. Brilliant end to the chapter. Cannot wait to see what happens next. Anytime Mereoleona's involved, I'm involved. You've got me excited. And that is pretty much my chapter review. Big chunks of this video has been taken up by the review, but I wanted to do the catch-ups for those chapters because it's important to this part of the chapter as well, because it all adds up. I hope you can appreciate that. But those that get this far, thank you very much. Please like, comment, share and subscribe. Your thoughts below. And as always, feel free to check out my subreddit /the Manga Man. I will post links to everything that I produce. Thank you very much for your time. Peace.